For almost 2 decades, one patent decided which cameras could record raw video internally. This week, it fell in Japan. And the company that brought it down is the last one you'd guess.
For me, it's even more interesting why Panasonic took Nikon to court because of that. Is Panasonic planning anything?
And that was just a start. Every major camera company reported numbers this week. FUJIFILM's cameras now out-earn everything else the company makes. Panasonic posted its best quarter in 41 years, and for GoPro, it's existential. There is no guarantee that this company will exist by the end of this year if it continues to perform as it has been. Winners, losers, and a power shift nobody saw coming. Let's get started.
This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 129 of Cinety Focus Check. I'm back with Johnny, who's still in Japan. Hi, Johnny.
Hello, Nino. How are you?
I'm good, and you're about to head out to China on a secret mission that we can't talk about yet.
Two secret missions, Nino. Two secret missions that I'm dying to share our community with what we're doing. I mean, that's really, for us, it's such a big thing.
Yeah.
The two missions. But, everything has time in life, and everybody, including us, have to be a bit more patient. Hopefully, around IBC time, we can talk a bit more. But for now, by the way, you mentioned China. Outside, it's quite rainy. It's very gray. There was a big typhoon yesterday in Tokyo. Hopefully, it will not come to Osaka, and then there is no flight.
Oh.
We'll see.
Okay, well, just get out of it as quickly as you can. But so we don't know if next week it's going to be the two of us or not. But anyway, this week we have a couple of news which are very much financial news, which sounds boring, but we decided to dive into the numbers a bit more and a bit more regularly, because basically all of the companies in our industry, all the camera companies from Japan especially, have reported numbers, and also some like American companies and as well. The ones that are actually public companies, of course, that have to report. Let's get started with the CIPA first half year 2026 numbers. So maybe, Johnny, you want to just give a little bit of an overview what the CIPA actually is.
So there is like a roof organization here in Japan that gather all the information from Sony, Canon, OM, Nikon, Panasonic, actually, of course, FUJIFILM, all the leading camera manufacturers. And they have been doing this for years. Very interesting to see how things are turning out in terms of cameras and also lenses. Yeah, and this is something that we've been following for quite some time. And I think if you look at the numbers and dive into it like you did in the article, I think you can maybe predict how the future might look.
Yeah. Very
interesting. The only grief that I personally have, that somehow there is no equivalent thing that I know of in China. Although there are no really, of course, there are some Chinese companies that are making cameras, but at least for the lens manufacturers, or I really hope that maybe the Japanese organization, the CIPA, will decide somehow to also include China, and then we have even a broader picture of the industry. But maybe you want to dive into it.
Yeah, the problem is, like I said in the beginning, is that, of course, only public companies that are in stock exchanges have to report these numbers. So it's not a full picture, but it is a fairly full picture. The only ones really missing is Blackmagic Design, which is a private company, DJI, which is also still a private company. And that's about it, right? Most of the others are actually public companies. So, and that's mostly Japanese companies. We also talk about two non-Japanese companies today, which is GoPro and Videndum, which are also public companies, and they are not from Japan, of course. But let's get started with the Japanese companies and specifically the CIPA results. So basically what these numbers say about the first half year of 2026 is that compact cameras, and that means cameras that have a lens built in, basically, keep booming. And it's a remarkable comeback, I would say, because we know that this segment is quite small in the lineup of most camera manufacturers. We used to have a lot more compact cameras, And a lot of them died because of the smartphone. I mean, we know that, there was a huge amount of different models from Canon and Sony specifically, and Panasonic as well. And this kind of portfolio was thinned out over the years. And then suddenly companies like Fujifilm came in and started creating cameras that were really purpose-driven, like more like lifestyle products. And we're very successful with it. And now everybody is going back into that segment. And we see that those compact cameras are now really, really booming again. What's interesting also is we had a strong start of the year with camera shipments in 2026. I think it's partly because of very strong releases, of course. I mean, we have a very attractive lineup of cameras. And don't forget that we always look at the video function of those cameras. I think the photo side is probably, I think it's fair to say that audiences now expect hybrid cameras, right? They need to have a very capable video function in mirrorless cameras and in compact cameras anyway. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of the purchases are also based on what people want for photography. Yeah. So, and in general, I think the lineup that we have in the market, I don't know what you think, Johnny, but it's as strong as it's hardly ever been. I think it's now with, Sony was maybe lagging a little bit behind up until the FX5, and now we have from Canon, Fujifilm, Panasonic, and Sony just basically very, very strong lineup. It's not that we're missing many features, right?
Well, I think we have to make to define compact cameras and compact cameras with fixed lenses. Those are two different segments. And I think the segment that you're referring to mostly, the growth, is the compact cameras with fixed lens.
Yeah.
This is growing up very, very fast. And in all honesty, we have an idea. We would love one day to make a camera, I would say. And if we would, that would have been exactly the segment that we would have touched, because we are so much narrow-minded in so many ways, because we are in our professional world and we are talking about professional cameras. Of course, some of them are professional and small compact cameras. But if you look at the audience, look at the customers worldwide, what do they want? They want simplicity. They want something they can literally point and shoot with confidence, with quality. And I think it's really a matter of how you feature that camera. And in this regards, we know that Panasonic did very well with this L10, for example. Canon is doing really great with the power shot, with the latest series and so on. So every camera, every manufacturer has something that they can hook. Of course, Fujifilm with the X106, for example, and previous generations. So we can see that there is a demand for those cameras. Those are also the cameras that it's very easy to tweak them and make them like a fashionable item, to make them something unique. And I think many of the companies are riding on this on this trend, and I'm sure we're going to see even more.
So we mentioned the compact boom, and if you look at this more closely, the boom is slowly cooling off. So the numbers are going down a little bit, but they are still very, very popular in amount of numbers that are actually been shipped. Like for the beginning of the year, you see that there was a peak in April, and now it's slowly getting a little bit less, but still very high numbers. And that's absolute like shipping numbers. We're talking about 200,000 bodies shipped in June 2026, for example, and around 250,000 in April. That's just for the compact camera section. Now, overall, the numbers go down a little bit. Like the total number of bodies shipped is going down a little bit, but not as much as you might think. And what actually is most interesting is that the more expensive models are becoming more popular. So you see that while the number of units goes down, people spend more money on the individual bodies. So people seem to be willing to pay more for more features. This might also be a reason, might simply be the price increases. Almost every manufacturer had to increase prices because of, like macroeconomic issues with memory, prices just rising significantly. Basically, all the manufacturers had to rise the prices of their cameras. And that might also be a reason, right? People just have to spend more money on the bodies because they're just simply getting more expensive. But it also looks like they want more capable bodies. And so let's keep that all in mind when we move on to the individual results from each one of those companies.
I like to see this because that also helps to segment different steps here. Like we can see, for example, when you talk about more expensive cameras, so that this is a sign for manufacturers that obviously, as you said, there is a demand for more expensive but more features, for example. And if you talk about compact cameras, obviously people are expecting to buy those at a certain price. But I think this whole picture can change from like day to night, the day the Chinese manufacturers will decide to press the gas and introduce cameras that actually will be in the same segment. Then we will have real competition. Then we're going to see real numbers. Because for now, it's really the Japanese manufacturers who are dominating this market, and the Chinese, and we know them firsthand and we know them very well. They're not sleeping. They're watching very carefully. We can see what they did already with lenses. The same will happen with cameras, unless the Japanese manufacturers are able to shift the boat much faster and innovate even much faster. So there's a saying, which I don't like to repeat, prepare the popcorn, because we are part of it. We're not just watching what's happening. But I really hope that this segment or those results will not look different in a year from now if the Chinese companies are in it.
Well, I think, like we saw, we talked a lot about the success of the pocket cameras and, the Pocket 4P and the Luna Ultra and this segment, which seems to be extremely popular. We know this has been the most popular camera product, or any product really, that DJI has ever made, like the Pocket line. So, of course, and that has to be looked at from the perspective of the compact camera boom in a way, right? Because price-wise, they will be similar. I mean, we're talking about cameras that are below $1,000. And even though it looks different from a classical compact camera, I think that this will be the segment that was going to shape the camera market for the next couple of years. I wouldn't be, like we talked about this before, but I wouldn't be surprised to see similar concepts from more traditional camera companies coming out also at some point.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Hollyland Solidcom Intercom series. Here's why I actually like these. It's fully duplex, everyone talks at once, like a real conversation. No push to talk, no walkies clipping over each other. And the dual mic noise cancellation kills around 20 decibels of ambient, like wind, generators, a crowd. The person on the other end just hears you clearly. And there's a version for whatever you're shooting. The C1 Pro is hubless. Pull it out of the case, power on, and 8 people are talking. All day on a full charge. Step up to the M1 Pro or SE Pro when you want belt packs and separate groups. Or the H1 when you're running up to 80 people with roaming across a whole venue. Same headset, bigger crew. Check out the Solidcom series over at hollyland.com. Link is in the description below. And now, back to the show.
Let's move on to Canon, because they are actually a good example for what we just talked about. Because Canon, with their latest results, are literally confirming the CIPA thesis from the inside. They've been extremely successful with their results, and especially when you look at their compact camera segment. The PowerShot line went from an afterthought to a real profit engine. And the question here is, of course, I mean, cameras like the C50, C80, of course, get our attention from the professional side, but the money is really coming from pocketable cameras, like you said, bought by people who've never heard of Cine or this podcast, I think, because it's, it's just a broad audience and it's a kind of consumer camera. So the real question is, what, will R&D focus on in the future? Because as more and more money basically shifts to those, I would say, wider products that have a much wider appeal, of course, it makes sense to put more money on the development of those. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could have seen already in the, was it Interbi or CP Plus? I think it was CP Plus, if I'm not mistaken. We could have seen already Canon talking about the next generation of cameras, compact cameras. They looked completely different. Those are like prototype. If you remember, they had even 2 or 3 of those. Like they really wanted to see what people would like or will be willing to pay for in terms of look and specification. So obviously, Canon is thinking forward. Nino, I think in this regards, Canon is kind of safe. They have let's call it a bit of the compact. I don't want to say lower end, but they have the compact line of cameras, which is very safe and secure. And then they have the more expensive cameras, even the hybrid cameras that we are very familiar with. So they have both, yeah. So they are covered in terms of growth, and we can see that it's really working very well for them.
Yeah, I mean, if we look more specifically, their imaging segment alone increased almost 18% year over year, with very healthy operating margins. So that means it leaves them money to invest into development, which is great. And the most eye-catching detail is that more than 50% of the annual growth comes from the compact cameras. So that's why it's important. And for the interchangeable lens cameras, it's mostly the full frame models that are the reason for the success. So that also means, which is great for us, that they're going to focus on that more. They're not going to probably make more APS-C or Super 35 models.
I have to cut you for a second, Nino, because that's interesting what you just said, especially if we go back to the CIPA results. And the CIPA results for lenses clearly shows that people are buying APS-C lenses more than full frame and large format. So it's a bit of, it's like a bit...
Well, maybe that's it takes some time, because if you buy the camera now, maybe we'll see those results for the lenses in the next quarters. Like you start with the camera and then you buy the lenses for it. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting that we're talking about growth of full frame cameras, and on the other hand, we can also see growth in APS-C lenses. Interesting.
Yeah, they do also really well with their network cameras, which is their PTZ cameras. And this is, of course, something we see across all brands, is that they focus a lot on those things because, basically for producers, it means less staff if you use those also on professional events. And they seem to be more and more capable and more successful. All right.
Not only that, I think normally you will buy more than one PTZ camera, because if you look at churches or events or universities or whoever need this type of arrangement, even small studios, normally you need more than one camera. You need 2 or 3 at least in order to cut from different directions. And that's why it's a very profitable business. And that's why we see so many companies now touching it.
Yeah. Let's move on to Fujifilm, and I think this is probably the best result we've seen this week from all the results. The interesting thing is that the imaging division of Fujifilm has become the group's biggest earner, and it's a significant piece of information, because Fujifilm is a healthcare and materials conglomerate. I mean, healthcare is huge in Fujifilm, yet the imaging division is the one that actually shows the strongest growth here, which is really remarkable. And I mean, there is, their obvious driver is, of course, the Instax segment, which is their instant cameras, basically cameras that are film-based cameras. Often, sometimes it's digital with a built-in printer. But the ones that are literally printing money are the ones that are printing photographs, and it's of course they are making a lot of money with those films. Very popular lifestyle cameras to have, basically what used to be Polaroid is now, this gap is really filled by Fujifilm cameras and the Instax line. And that has been doing really well, which is why we see a lot of new models in that field. We have the Instax Mini Evo and the Instax Mini Evo Cinema, which, by the way, you promised to bring one from Japan. I'm still holding you to that.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I mean, I looked at it very closely, and it is beautiful in the sense that how the design is. In terms of functionality, It's not there yet.
Why? Let's
I
do
promise to bring you the
30-second clips. It's enough. You don't need more.
Yeah. I promise to look at much closer at the second generation whenever this comes, because I'm sure that Fujifilm haven't said the last word here.
Anyway.
There's so much more to do with that specific line.
Yeah.
So yeah, but a little anecdote. I'm here in Japan every year for minimum 2 months, and I'm always looking at what people are using. It's just interesting for me. And if I look at the Japanese audience as a lackmus of what's happening in our industry, I think this is the first year that I'm seeing so many Fujifilm cameras with normal people around. This is really, and it's not that I'm looking for a particular brand. Yeah, I'm unbiased here. In all honesty, I just want to see what they use. I can tell you that a lot of the older guys, much older than me, are running with full frame cameras from other manufacturers like Sony and Canon, sometimes Nikon, with huge lenses, because they are really after wildlife. And here in Japan, you can find Japanese gardens or some parks. So you can see 70 plus years old people running with huge cameras, full frame cameras with huge lenses, which is, by the way, if the companies would have done a better research and better education, they would communicate with this potential segment to run with micro four third sensors and smaller lenses, because they can achieve the same effect with much lighter equipment. But put this aside for a second. Just looking around, so many young people are running with Fujifilm APS-C cameras, and it's just nice to see that people are moving away from those mobile phones. Of course, people are still using them, but you see many more young ones with Fujifilm cameras. And I'm just happy for Fujifilm to see that the time, energy, and whatever they do in order to push this segment is working very well. Nevertheless, we haven't heard from them for quite some time. And
You mean for new products?
For new products. So I can only hope that something will pop up still later this year. That's it.
Well, yeah. The heavy lifting in the numbers was really done by the X100 line. Like you said, that's probably the ones you see on the streets, because the X100VI is incredibly successful. Now, a little bit of a flag here is that we know that they already significantly raised prices in the US last year as a response to the tariffs, and they will raise prices here in Europe by the end of August, actually September 1st. So if you are thinking about buying a Fujifilm camera in Europe, think about buying it now, because we already know of the price jumps, and actually the X100VI will have the most significant jump from 1,800 to 2,000 euros. And there's a 500 euro jump for the GFX 102, climbing to 8,500 and so on. And all of the others actually also rising by around 100 euros each. So just keep that in mind if you are thinking about buying a Fujifilm camera. Consider doing that still in August, before the prices go higher here as well as they have already in the US. Now, last mention with Fujifilm, of course, is in general, their cinema segment is very new, of course, specifically the GFX Eterna 55. We don't have individual numbers for this camera. We just know the overall imaging division is doing really well. We know that this is kind of their first real step into the cinema world. Let's see how well it does. We hope it does well. I just hope they, come up with new, more budgeted versions that are cinema or video specific in the future of a camera like this.
Well, now they have the expertise. Don't forget that when you bring to the camera, to the market, a camera in that magnitude, you really gather so much experience, and a lot of the software and a lot of the actual engineering is already there. So it's just really a matter of A, willingness, B, whatever your future plan is, and if those two aligns together, I really also hope to see something, because we heard it after the GFX Eterna 55 review that we did. people really want to see something a bit smaller, more personal, in this segment that they can run around and do some stuff. And I really hope that Fujifilm will listen. Usually they are. And let's see what the future will bring.
All right, let's move on to Nikon. Actually, that is kind of the outlier of most of the results this week, because they seem to be missing the industry party of the last quarter, because camera sales really slipped in China, while also, I mean, that's true for all of them, but the memory prices really eat into their profits. I mean, you know, we said that Fujifilm... What happened? Oh, okay. Okay, let's move on to Nikon. That is the result of the week that is a bit of a downer compared to the others, because they seem to be missing the industry party with their latest results. The camera results really slipped in China, while the memory prices that keep rising, of course, for everybody, are eating into their profits. We saw that Fujifilm is raising the prices mostly, of course, because of the rising memory prices, as so many other manufacturers in the industry and anything to do with computers have done. But yeah, so Nikon is the only one that's really not up. There's two distinct problems. First of all, the China demand, which is a market-specific issue, and the memory pricing, which is, as we said, an industry-wide input cost that everybody has to deal with. Now, the China problem is Nikon-specific, and yeah, we just saw. Let's look at the numbers a little bit more in detail. There,
you know, while you're looking at the numbers, just my question is, and I guess that's also what many of our viewers will ask: what does the memory cost increase has to do with the camera manufacturers themselves? Because many of them are actually not using any memory within the camera. So, what is the connection here?
Well, it's semiconductors, really. It's like all the electronics inside a camera that also, you know, like are just more expensive to produce. And yes, the memory itself is the most expensive, but we're also talking about RAM, and every camera has RAM, has a buffer, so that also goes up. And it seems to affect some more than others, but everybody seems to be rising prices, actually. And it's, I mean, Nikon, if you look at their numbers, they have had 2 years of shrinking profits already. And it's now that really they had a peak in I think 2025 actually, and since then the profit is just simply going down. And of course that is a lot of it can be attributed to the rising memory costs, but also because they just had a severe a severe demand contraction, specifically in China. Why that is, we don't know, but less people in China seem to be buying Nikon cameras and lenses. And the rest of Nikon is doing fine, by the way, which is also worth mentioning. Of course, also much bigger conglomerate than just imaging. Like where we saw with Canon, the imaging division is the most successful one out of the, and also with Fujifilm. In both cases, the imaging divisions are doing really fine, whereas both companies have a much bigger business, of course. With Nikon, it's the other way around. The rest of the company is doing fine, but imaging is not doing so great. So let's see what that means.
I can tell you that some European vendors actually contacted us, telling us that to their surprise, the Nikon ZR is not selling as well as they were expecting, especially after the hype, especially after hearing how well the camera did in the US and so on. And that was a bit of a surprise for me personally, to see that there's such a difference between the US market and the European market. I wonder why, but I don't have an answer for that.
Well, I think we were not so much on top of this story, but when we released this, we got a lot of, we got a lot of comments on social media from people who bought the ZR and are very disappointed in Nikon for not releasing the firmware upgrades that they were expecting, specifically fixing that problem with the mushy image when shooting H.265. We know the camera is shooting in 3 flavors of video RAW, which is great, and it looks great and so on. But like for the everyday shooter, of course, you still need to have a capable compressed codec as well. And we know that it's simply not performing well. And they have promised an update which still hasn't arrived. I'm actually working on a story on this, which I maybe release. By the time you see this, it might already be out, where we, like are highlighting what people have told us, that they're basically waiting for this firmware update for the ZR, which still hasn't arrived, that would fix this and some other issues that people have. So that's the question. We saw this, like it was a very strong first step into kind of more or less fusing red technology into the Nikon brand. But nothing has happened since September last year when this camera was announced, and it hasn't gotten, like you said, it's not. There was a hype at the beginning, and it has tapered off, and we can clearly see in the feedback from you guys who have the camera that there is a lot of disappointment now in how the camera has been treated by Nikon with firmware updates. So let's see.
Again, just to make a separation between the capabilities of the camera, and people really love the red RAW codec inside it, but how Nikon is kind of doing the follow-up and treating people with the firmware updates. But you said that nothing has happened since then. I have to say, it's not that you just design cameras, just like that. It usually will take 2 to 3 years, and hopefully Nikon will continue this trend. Because if you remember, I think right after the announcement of the camera and the review we did and all the meetings that we had and so on, somewhere at the back of my mind, I have somebody telling us that actually that was one of a time. Like, it's not that Nikon is actually planning to continue with the line. That was not a Nikon official, I have to say here, but somebody that is very well rooted in our industry, and both of us were like, what? That looks like such a great idea and the beginning of something. So I'll be much more relaxed to see within the next, hopefully within a year, to see if something will follow with another edition of the camera, or the camera itself is really good. Imagine if they will add some, I don't know, this quiz or the ability to film in open gate. Who knows what this camera and processor are still able to do with a proper firmware update. This we just simply don't know, but let's see.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just I think more has to happen with this camera. And what's also interesting in the results, we cannot see red specific results. Like it's not possible to kind of, because the whole red acquisition that has just been rolled into their imaging thing, so you can't identify how many red branded cameras have been sold, for example. But the overall picture, and we know that the higher end industry is really suffering, and we see this with all the results from all the manufacturers that and what the acquisition of ARRI and all that has happened over the last year. We know that the high end is in a difficult spot right now. So I wouldn't be surprised that if the red cameras, the red branded Nikon cameras weren't selling as well as in the past, but we don't have the numbers for that. Let's move on to Panasonic. Now, Panasonic actually is a bit of an outlier here also, because we don't have imaging specific results. However, they have posted their best quarter in 41 years. So Panasonic is having a great time actually, but again, most of that is based on AI data centers, so that's their highest first quarter operating profit since 1985, $1.2 billion, and more than double of last year. That's incredible. And of course, when you hear numbers like this in this day and age, we all know what that means. It's AI data centers. So backup batteries, capacitors, circuit board materials, that's where they make their real money. And it's any kind of AI-related industrial products in total, that really makes the difference for them. And don't forget, they're also big in batteries, which is also something that is in higher demand than ever before. So that's
I think
the
it's
growth
worth.
engine.
Yeah, sorry to cut you. I just think it's worth noting for those who are not familiar. But actually, the division, the AVC, the part that is responsible for doing the camera, is only, it's like it's something within a bigger division that makes refrigerators, that makes the washing machines, they like all these white appliances. And also when I first heard about it, it was like, what the camera division has to do with all of those things? I mean, it doesn't fit together. But obviously, for whoever makes the decisions at Panasonic, it makes a lot of sense that the camera and the refrigerators and the washing machines will all, and the hair dryers, we will all sit on the same platform here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like a you know the Russian dolls, the babushkas. That's how it works. It's like the Smart Life division, which you said that's the one that has also refrigerators, washing machines, and hair dryers. That contains the AVC unit, which is audio visual probably company or whatever inside of Panasonic, but that also contains, next to the Lumix and the imaging solutions business division that contains Lumix, is inside the AVC unit. The AVC unit also contains the televisions and communications networks. So it's really like, it's a small thing inside something so much bigger. We just know that the AVC division, which again also has the TVs and the network stuff, that also fell and declined around 14%, which they attributed to weaker sales in Europe and soft demand in China. But again, because the rest of the company grew so much, this really didn't make a difference for them. But it also kind of gives you an overview of what that means, like what a priority or not priority the Lumix division probably is within Panasonic, as opposed to companies like Canon, Nikon, Fujifilm, and Sony. So that's the interesting thing. But nothing here really reflects bad on the products. I mean, that's the interesting thing. You know, like, we can just remind you that the S1 II was our overall camera of the year, 2025. It really was the outperforming. It was outperforming all the others that came to market last year. The runner-up was the Nikon ZR, and also the V-Raptor X and the iPhone 17 Pro. But you know, like, just saying that in terms of focus, that's where we stand within Panasonic on that.
I mean, the S1 II is a great camera. The S9 is a great camera. The L10 is a very nice camera. So, you know, and all those cameras, some of them are really out. Like the L10, I think it was back ordered right after it came out. So it's literally, it has a peak. There's some people, or many of us, that will enjoy the camera and its features for quite some time, and then somehow something is happening which is beyond our understanding.
Yeah. But anyway, they, you know, like, I think everybody knows in the industry that this AI device bonanza can't go on forever. So at some point they will come back to a normal development. And as much as the imaging has not probably contributed to Panasonic's success last quarter, it will also not contribute to the AI bubble bursting at some point. So let's move on to Sony. Now, Sony is interesting also because, again, also a huge conglomerate with a lot of different business divisions. However, I would say it's safe to say that their business is much more about imaging than Panasonic's business overall, because Sony is, you know, like one of the largest, or if not the largest, sensor manufacturer in the world when it comes to the numbers of sensors they make also for other brands. And now the first thing I want to mention is that what's now confirmed with the Sony numbers is that they put a bid for Tamron, because we had last week, we talked about that with Tamron issuing a small, very short release because somehow the news got out that they were trying to be, somebody like Sony is trying to acquire Tamron. Now this is confirmed in the earnings context of Sony themselves, which tells us far more about the intent. So because if they tell us about this publicly, of course, that it really means that this is something they want to pursue. So actually last week we talked about, we still don't know what happens if they acquire Tamron, if they will keep making ZRF or X-mount lenses. And I think you argued that this is precisely the point of them going there. I mean, with Sony, with looking at how much money they make for the sensors, I think it might be safe to say that that's what you said is true. Like they really make the profit engine is sensors, not cameras overall or imaging. It's really their money is in the sensors and just distributing these sensors as widely as possible. And they probably that's what's the money maker for them. Their overall sales increased over 8%, and their operating incomes also raised 40%. The cameras hold steady. They didn't really increase a lot. It's about 2% difference to last year, 2% up. I think it's safe to say that, the premium cameras, premium stills cameras like the A7 IV, which did really well, was selling really well. And I think we will see this in the future, but I think there is some pent-up demand from Sony video shooters, right? Because we haven't had raw internal shooting up until the FX5 was just released. So let's see what that means for the future. But I think because they have such a huge installed user base, I think as far as we know, and we've reported about this, the FX5 orders are exceeding expectations according to Sony. So I think we will see that result down the line, what that means for their numbers in the future. We are also hearing from some commentators that because of that, also we already see the shipping date shifting from August to September. That's actually literally confirming what they said, that people need to be more patient about getting their cameras in hand. But we don't know exactly why.
I think it's very important to say that we don't know if there are suddenly some issues, because we're getting different information.
Well, we have the report
sources
from Sony which said that that's why it will take longer, that because they had a lot of orders. So we have that.
Sure. But we are trying to verify if there's any other issues that are pushing the delivery date from August to September. Hopefully,
the launch has not been delayed. I know people here in Vienna who's already, I think around 20 units have been shipped at least here from one dealer. So they are shipping. I think it's just probably when you order now, you will get it only in September. So it's not that the launch has been delayed. They are already in people's hands. We are also have been contacted by Sony now finally, because people keep asking us about the lab test for this camera. So we should hopefully within the next weeks finally receive a production body for the lab test. And we've been contacted by them. So it's out. People are receiving their units. It's not, the launch has definitely not been delayed. I think it's just the high demand that will push upcoming. I mean, it's already middle of August anyway, so if you get it in September, it's fine, I guess. Good. So image sensors are the profit engine of Sony. I mean, just to have some numbers here, 26% increase for sales of sensors, and more than doubling the profit of that whole segment of the sensors. Sony attributes the jump to increased sales of image sensors for mobile products, so phones, an improved product mix and higher unit sales, while flagging potentially weaker smartphone demand as a risk going forward. So I mean, overall, just fully positive news on their sensor division. And we know that they also have a low fix sensor now, which of course completely outperformed anything else we've ever seen in our Pocket 4P lab test, which is not a Sony sensor. It's likely the OmniVision sensor, but Sony also has a sensor coming out with this technology. So I guess there's almost guarantee for more demand in the mobile segment there if that performs as expected. There is one significant thing we need to address in the sensor business. There has been an earthquake in Japan, in the region which produces a lot of their sensors, one of their key factories. I have to follow up because they said they already want, by the time you listen to this, they were planning to already ramp up production to normal levels again, but they weren't sure about that at the end of July. So we'll see if that is something that we have to be aware of, because we've had this before, right? That Japan is very prone to have earthquakes, and we have had significant delays of camera products in the past from Sony because factories have been affected by earthquakes. So let's hope that this will not be the case in this time. That was I think in 2016 in the same region. We had delayed camera production from a lot of brands for over a year at that time. Good. In general, Sony is raising their outlook for the rest of the year, which is good. And that's Sony.
Good. Let's talk about GoPro and then Videndum quickly.
Yes, GoPro. So GoPro also reported, again, GoPro is a public company, so they have to report their numbers, and it's not looking great. I mean, we've had, that's the bleakest number of the week, and their camera sales have fallen 38%, and they have depleted their cash pile down to 27 million, which actually won't actually get them through a full quarter. Now, we know that there has been a going risk concern, which by an auditor, going concern doubts flagged by an auditor, which we reported about, which basically means that there is no guarantee that this company will exist by the end of this year if it continues to perform as it has been. And basically 38% less camera sales is a huge drop, of course. The cash that's left is 27 million. That's down 45% from the year end. And the only number that has gone up is their subscription, which has been growing a little bit, but their overall annual revenue has been declining ever since 2021. So in 2021, they made over $1.16 billion, and now they're down to 652 by the end of 2025. So just before we talk about buyers, the one thing I wanted to mention, which is interesting, is that they have been, the biggest decline was with retail partners. So they lost almost 50% in Q2 from sales with retail partners, while their own channel through their own website grew by 13%. So apparently they're trying to shift buyers to their own channel, which seems to succeed a little bit, but of course they're losing more than they're gaining here, which of course, I mean, you can just charge higher margins if you sell directly. You don't have to pay the retail partners, but it's not working that as much as they were hoping, I guess. Yes, they are. The most revealing part of the earnings call, which was actually not mentioned in the numbers, so I listened to the whole earnings call, was by Nick Woodman. And he said, and I quote, "We're in the later stages of the process." He means the potential sale process. As I've shared, this process has my full support. So that was the kind of on the record confirmation that they're really, really, really kind of looking for a buyer. I think he said something about companies from the financial, military, and also I think technical sector are part of this process. So we don't know. When he says financial, that also, of course, could mean private equity. companies. We don't know. I mean, it to me, it's this. All of this sounds like we're gonna hear about GoPro being sold very soon. The one thing that I want to mention, they are still promising the Mission 1 Pro ILS. That's the interchangeable lens version of the Mission 1 Pro camera that they released, which is the, what is it, 1 inch? Is it 1 inch sensor? Action camera. They call it a cinema camera, but I think we still call it an. Is that the sensor size? Yeah, I don't know. It's a larger sensor than a traditional action cam anyway, but it is, still the action cam form factor, I would say, with an interchangeable lens, but it lacks autofocus. And but a lot of we were excited about this because it's a segment that we haven't seen before, and I can see a lot of applications for this. However, unfortunately, the interchangeable lens version of that camera hasn't been released yet. They were still promising it for this quarter, so that really only leaves September for this to be released. And yeah, so let's hope we will actually see it released in September. This was supposed to have the same price as the Mission 1 Pro, which, by the way, both the Mission 1 and the Mission 1 Pro got a price drop of $100 just this week as well, which probably is a sign of weak sales, as we have just seen confirmed. Should they just want to sell more? We already said that we think $700 is a bit steep for, which arguably is a better action camera with better image processing and so on, but still it is a huge difference to what you will pay for a DJI Action or Insta360 Ace Pro, which are dominating the market right now. And this puts it a little bit more closely to, I think, what people have been expecting at $600. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to take my words back. It's a 1 inch sensor across the line, of course. It just, this one has a, as you said, interchangeable lens mount.
Yep.
And this is a micro four thirds
mount.
Sorry, guys.
Yep.
Mount, yeah. So many cameras, mounts, and so on. But
yeah.
I wish that they would have started with the ILS actually first to bring it to the market. If everything goes right, as you said, September will be the D-Day. I hope it's not too late, and before people kind of are too happy that might happen to a company that has been in the market for such a long time because of different reasons, the Karma drone failure and so on. Don't forget that there are actually people who work in this company, and there are quite a few of them. We personally know many of them, and we really hope that in one way or another, this ship will manage to sail to safe shores. I hope so, and I'm sure Nino too.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the downfall of GoPro is their own fault, unfortunately, in terms of like innovation, the lack of innovation that has been. Not much has been happening for a couple of years, and they've just been betting on the same horse on that action camera for too many years. And then at the same time, the Chinese rivals were really overtaking them also in performance. And we've done a series of action cam comparison reviews where we could see like the original DJI Action was really far behind the GoPro at the time. And then it took them a couple of years, and then there was a point in time where it just overtook it in quality, and the same is true for the other one, the Insta360, and that's just unfortunate. They just have been, and it's really been, and at the same time, I think they've probably been focusing on this Karma drone, which was a failure. So yeah, some not so great decisions. We just hope they survive, because I think we need also a couple of Western companies that are successful in the camera space, because as it looks right now, everything seems to be shifting to the Far East, specifically to China, which is, of course, it's always good to have competition from different markets in the world. So let's just hope they can go on and find a solution. I mean, like with a lot of companies, we talk about, slimming the product line would be a solution. I mean, honestly, with GoPro, I wouldn't know what else to slim down, maybe drop the 360 camera, but it's not that they have such a big portfolio at all, and they've never had it, which is actually leading me to the next company, Videndum, which has a huge portfolio, and they also perform released numbers. Now, we've reported about Videndum many times before. We know that they've been in trouble for a while as well, because of course, very, very complex operation, a lot of different brands, especially in the pro cinema market. They have different divisions three different divisions that encompass several of those brands. I think they've actually cut it down to 2 divisions now, but still, Sachtler, Teradek, Small HD, Anton Bauer, O'Connor, Manfrotto, Light Panels, Vinton, Quasar Science, they're all owned by Videndum. And that's why it's very, very troubling to hear that they are in trouble, because if Videndum explodes or implodes, we will feel the ramifications in the pro industry for broadcast and cine for a while. Now, the interesting thing is the money makers in this company are still the creative division, which is the one that houses Teradek and Small HD. Teradek specifically, of course, has a USP with their low latency wireless transmission, which they own the patent on. So nobody else, and we've tried all of them, has been coming close to that, right? In terms of low latency wireless transmission, everybody trusts Teradek because they are also the only ones in the market, because they own that patent. They sold the Amimon brand also to make some money, but they kept the patent that was invented by Amimon, and that Videndum acquired before that. All the others are, just maintaining this huge amount of brands and do the marketing for all of them. I think must be extremely difficult. Now, they have finally a new CEO, which is great. They actually have been looking for one for a long time. I think a lot of people were willing to take on the job. Let's just go through some of the numbers here. So the revenue is down 4%. It's now 110 million pounds. It's essentially flat, like for like, because if you look at they have, well, first of all, they've sold Joby a while ago, which was their, I would say, almost prosumer brand of microphones. And also National Geographic bags, which is certainly something they paid a lot of money for the license. Now, the interesting thing is that, well, there is a statutory 9.6 million operating profit. However, we should take that with a grain of salt, because a lot of that came from adjusting items and they're basically writing off old revolving credit debt from the previous lenders. So effectively, a lot of people who had big stakes in Videndum lost a lot of money, and they kind of repackaged everything in order to survive. That's what happened. So the detail that should worry people is a little bit buried, is because the flat revenue was held up by the Winter Olympics in Italy and the FIFA World Cup, which together made around £5.5 million, while the rest of the business gave back around 5.3 million. So that basically means that 2 of the largest sports events in the calendar are the only reason why the top line held. There are no repeats of that next year. So so we just have to keep in mind that there's not such a big event coming up that might actually spark their revenue if there isn't another plan to actually get revenue up.
Yeah, I want to say also that obviously investors were not really impressed with the results and also with the kind of press conference that they made in order to share the information. I think it's now the lowest ever that the stock is it's really the bottom. It's like amazing how it kept falling since the announcement of these results. I also want to mention here that the company is promising 26 new products to come within a year, but they're also saying that the Manfrotto One hybrid tripod, the one that you covered already, I think, when was this? I think it was even last year. Actually, they had a lot of manufacturing issues in Feltre in Italy, and that's why they could not deliver as much or as fast as they wanted. And that means that, of course, people are simply not waiting. They're looking for other solutions, and that was really hurting them.
Yeah, that's frustrating because that was genuinely...
That's frustrating.
Genuinely the one product that I thought was very innovative, the only one that came out over the last 1.5, 2
exactly.
years, and then they can't ship it because of manufacturing problems. That's frustrating. I mean, the moneymaker in general, the media solutions division, which includes Manfrotto, Gizzo, Lowepro, and Rycode, is the one that's the troublemaker, because that's literally the products that are like commodities, right? I mean, those are seem to be very easy to make for other manufacturers, and I think buyers have moved on from Manfrotto and just buy. And we know that Videndum used to be the tripod company. They are owning 6-7 different tripod brands, and now I think a lot of the especially mid-range and lower end, and that's where the money now lies, as we know, as the high end is suffering anyway. This has been taken by other manufacturers. We see a lot of Chinese manufacturers going into tripods. We have Tilta and Small Rig, and they're all doing tripods, and they're good tripods. I mean, they're not like in the old days where the tripods that were not from a Videndum brand were bad, kind of, except for maybe Miller and some other outliers, but most of them were Videndum brands. It's not the case anymore. I mean, you can get a very good tripod from a different brand for a lot less money now. And if you look at their results, the premium tools with defensible technology are the ones that are holding the pricing and their margin, while all the commodity stuff is actually struggling. And what I mean by premium tools, it's the Teradek and Small HD stuff, especially Teradek. That's really the only one that has been successful and turning a proper operating profit. And forever, whatever will happen with this company, I think that's I think there's just no way around to consolidate some of those brands. I mean, why are you still, I don't understand why you still have that many tripod brands, for example. It just pack them together. We've talked about this before. Just reduce it to 2 brands. You need maybe the Manfrotto and the premium brand, which could be, not that I mean, I love the brands. I'm a Sachtler user. I've been my whole life. I love these tripods, right? I would hate it to disappear, but to be real, do you need O'Connor, Sachtler, and Vinton, which are basically, especially Vinton and Sachtler are on the same level. You can put them together. I don't know. It's
but they're for different targets. I think the Vinton is much more known in the broadcast. Sachtler is more in the ENG news and the kind of cinema. But in all honesty, I think both of us would love to meet the new CEO, and from our we are very modest where we are, like in the industry, but to ask the hard question, I think that the audience really deserve honest answers beyond the numbers, and to understand what he, as the new CEO with such a huge responsibility and a very nice salary, I would say,
well, let's see.
Would
I hope for him.
Like what is his plan? How do you take such a big ship what would you do in order to try to save it?
We'll try to contact
Because-
them to get him on camera at IBC. Let's see. I mean, he's only taking over on August 17th. It's in a couple of days from now. So he's not actually at the helm yet. But let's see. The concerning thing is that this going concern language hasn't changed. So the board still says that adequate resources for at least 12 months and headroom over... anyway, it's just basically still in trouble. That's what it says. A sale is still a possibility as far as we've heard. And there's just still this uncertainty of what will happen. So, yeah. But let's see if they actually release something new at IBC. I'm sure they're there with a booth. But
it's not about something new, it's really, for me, it's not about something new. It's about something that can shake the industry, something that people can go like, wow, something that people really want, something that is really innovative. It's not about another bag. It's not about another tripod. You know what? It's about like something that people will go like, you know what? Something that the other Chinese companies might want to imitate. Because then you know that you're successful. And in that regards, I'm really looking forward to see what is this, what the 26 new products, what did they look like?
Yeah.
I'm very curious.
Let's continue with Sony. We asked Sony a couple questions after we got a lot of comments on the poll, actually, and got some answers, which we reported about. So we got the confirmation that the Sony FX5 IBIS lock service is now targeted for December. As a reminder, that is, actually a lot of people have asked us, what will it take to get the IBIS locked? Now, question, why do we need the IBIS locked? Well, even if you shut it off in camera, the sensor can still move a little bit. So, and a lot of people want to use the FX5 as like a crash camera, like put it on something. And Sony already announced when we had the press call with them that they will offer this service, but it is something where you will need to send in your hardware. You will not be able to purchase a locked IBIS sensor from the start. So you need to send probably through a retailer, authorized retailer, the camera to Sony. They lock the sensor and it's a non-reversible process. So they told us now that this they are targeting availability for this service starting in December. So any other answers we want to talk about from those questions, Johnny?
Yeah, we ask why no 25 and 29.97p, why those are missing from H.265. And apparently, according to Sony, this is an application to the XAVC HS, H.265 only, and the specifications of the codec, which I was not really aware, because so many others with H.265 are also allowing 25 and 29.97. Obviously, within the XAVC HS, this is not part of the specifications. And as long as this is not part of the specifications, it will not be there.
Yeah, it's strange.
Which is a pity.
It's strange because it's
25.
their codec, right? It's a Sony codec. It's not like they can say as an excuse that somebody else's codec, it's a Sony codec. So let's
not only this 25p. This is the leading. You need this frame rate to work in Europe and in China, parts of Africa and so on. So it's a bit of a strange answer, I would say, and I wish that Sony engineers will actually look at that and maybe decide to change it.
Yeah. Then we also asked about the cache buffer for high frame rate capture. You want to talk about that?
That's right. Well, the answer is no comment. Let's just highlight why you need it. So the FX5 will be capable of recording 240p frames per second in 4K, which is really, really great. And of course, so many of our users, what you don't want to spend. Let's say that you're filming a butterfly, you don't want to run and waste your memory just for that few seconds, which of course will be stretched into something very nice. So what you want is the ability of the camera to kind of record a cache. And that means when you press the button, it will record the last, let's say, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or so on. And this is a very useful feature. You can find it on every camera that actually records high frame rate. And let's say the 240 frames per second is already scratching this type of high frame rate. So
Yeah.
no comment. Hopefully they will consider this and understand why it's so important.
I mean, there is, of course, a kind of requirement to have a in-camera buffer for that. Theoretically, they could use some of the memory card for that, but that would, of course, could theoretically degrade the memory card faster, because if you use the memory card for that, it constantly needs to save a certain amount of frame and delete the old ones, and do that continuously until you actually press the button, and then just physically save whatever you defined, last 10 seconds or whatever. So if the camera doesn't have a built-in RAM specifically for that purpose, which it might not have, it will have to use the card memory, which might degrade that. However, the funny thing is that Sony actually is neglecting that and hasn't talked about it, because if you think back to cameras like the FS700, which was an extremely capable slow motion camera, and at the time the most affordable one in the market, that could also shoot 240 frames per second in HD, I think. It was the only camera capable of doing that for a very long time at a affordable price point. That came with a pre-rec trigger from the start. So I'm very surprised that they haven't actually thought about this. So let's just hope they can fix this. And I think it is something that could be done with firmware, even if it means that it, uses the fast CF Express Type A cards as the buffer themselves. So just with people have to be aware that it, of course, will kind of put a lot of strain on that memory. So it might degrade faster. Now, we also asked about the reboots. I decided to embed a video from our friend Jake Radcliffe from CVP here, who, by the way, actually started his own YouTube channel, which is very worth subscribing to. Jake is amazing, and he has been running the CVP YouTube channel for years and actually has grown it into what it is now. And he decided to start his own channel on the side next to doing, he's not leaving CVP, so he's still with them, but he wants to do a little bit more in-depth videos because he knows so much, and he did a great video and explaining the rebooting thing. And I think it's fair to say it's less of an issue than a lot of people think it might be. We know that a lot of Sony cameras actually need to reboot when you switch them between PAL and NTSC. That's normal for Sony cameras, and it's always been the case, and it's also the case for the FX5. There are some additional modes where it needs to reboot, for example, when you switch from 16:9 to 17:9. And that's also the case, by the way, with the FX3 and the FX6, so that's nothing new. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that, to be honest. Yeah.
And it can be a little bit, like a drag, and especially that that other companies are doing it a bit differently. And for me, just because that was done in the FX3 or FX6 or whatever, it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be changed or corrected or be faster. It's not a biggie, but it's still there, and it can still be like, okay, let's wait those few seconds.
Yeah, but anyway,
I'm smiling because when I worked with the camera, of course, it came up and like, okay, I'll wait, because it's not that there's another option here. Yeah, so either you like it and take it, or you have to accept it.
I'll give you my opinion on this once we finally have it here at the office too, and I can try it out, because as a Sony user, it's never been an issue for me. Because it's not, maybe it's a little bit of a bigger issue now, I don't know. But as far as I have seen, I also think it's a little bit blown out of proportion. It's not that you need to do this so often. And I think as long as you stay within either 25p or 24/2997 in NTSC, I think it's okay. But let's see. I will only share my opinion on this once I have had my own hands on it. And last news here is that XOCN files are now natively available in Resolve with the latest update to 2104. It's the specific XOCN version that the LT and so on that the FX5 supports, and also the C1 and C2. They can go straight. That's the beta Resolve version that you also used. That's now a production version, and it's out there. Good. Okay, let's move on to our, I would say, regulatory section. And this one is a big one for our listeners in the US, because there is a chance that the FCC might outrule some of the DJI drones that you already use. And that's because they have issued a kind of prohibit on future importation and sales in the United States of foreign-made military-grade drones that are already authorized for the American market, which the definition of military-grade you might think is not applying to your DJI drone, but this covers thermal imaging, LiDAR, agricultural spraying, docking stations, drones over 55 pounds, and swarming systems. Now, the biggest worry here is, of course, LiDAR, because most of the latest higher-end, or all of them actually, DJI drones have LiDAR. And that includes, of course, the Mavic line, but also the Air and so on. And even the Mini series now with the latest ones. So, there is a chance that they are proposing this. They're proposing the prohibiting these drones which are made outside the US to be sold and used in the US. So let's see what that will mean. It's a very, very broad definition. The only carve out here is domestically produced equipment and imports for government use. But I mean, there are a lot of DJI drones in the market that are also specific to agriculture in their enterprise section, which we might not be aware of. But, like those drones that can spray some pesticides and stuff like that. And also thermal imaging drones from DJI. That's really a problem that DJI could face. For now, everything is still legal to buy. This is a US regulatory matter. It will not affect you outside of the US. However, just be aware of this might actually creep into our reality and then also affect drones that are made for filmmaking. We just hope that there will be some kind of pushback against that. I'm sure DJI will also do something against that. They're also always asking people to comment on those things. This is a proposal which is open for public comment, and the FCC explicitly asks, whether its own list adequately captures military-grade equipment. So I think it's fair for you to raise your voice if you are affected by this as a shooter in the US who uses DJI drones. So follow the link here to the FCC's electronic comment filing system, and then give them feedback on why this doesn't make any sense for drones that are used for filmmaking. Moving on to another regulatory thing, and it's RED's compressed RAW patent that has, stuck with us for, almost 2 decades now, has been finally invalidated in Japan. Now, this is interesting because this is, of course, something we've dealt with for a very long time. The reason why we haven't had internal RAW video recording in cameras other than RED cameras for a very, very long time was that RED had a patent on this, and it arguably was one of the most valuable assets that RED had when Nikon acquired them. Now, we have seen raw video introduced in most other manufacturers' cameras over the last couple of years, and that is likely because they have licensed it. They have allowed this to happen. Now, the irony here is that Nikon spent years fighting this patent, and then they bought RED in order to kind of control it, and now they have, at least in Japan, lost defending it. That also means like that's the question, what will happen outside of Japan, because we know that Apple actually lost this battle, like this patent battle before. Apple has sued against this before in the US and lost it. The funny thing is, I mean, I really recommend you, I've linked it here in the article, but look at this patent. There is a platform called Google Patents, which gives you access, like, the Google search engine, you will have access to basically all the patents, especially in the US, but worldwide, and just be able to look at them and look at the definition of that patent. I mean, the patent itself is called video camera. It's so broad, it's incredible. And the way it's defined of how this works is so basic in a way that it's arguably something that, in our opinion, should never have been granted to Red in the first place. But it was, and it has been defended quite successfully for a very long time. And now, for the first time, it's been kind of invalidated by a court. And we will see what that means from going, from here for other markets as well. So let's not, it's not fair to say that this patent is dead everywhere, but it's fair to say that it is challenged, and there might be other patent courts around the world who look at this as an example and might also invalidate it. But here is I made a little bit of a timeline of when this happened. So in 2007, the Red 1 launched with Red Code RAW, and that's around the time the patent was awarded. There was a Sony legal battle in 2013, and the patent survived that. Then also in 2019, the Apple challenge was dismissed in court. In 2022, Red sued Nikon over the use of RAW in their cameras. And we know that firsthand from, actually one of the first episodes of this podcast dealt with the acquisition of Red by Nikon, and we know from things that Jared Land actually said, the former CEO of Red, that it's actually that lawsuit of Red against Nikon which was the starting point of them being acquired by Nikon. So I think it's fair to say that they wanted their technology, they wanted this patent specifically, they wanted to own it in order to control it, and now it has been invalidated 2 years later in Japan. So let's see where things move from here. Overall, I would say a bad week for Nikon, both in their results, but also in losing that patent battle in court in Japan. What do you think, Johnny?
Well, I think it's also very important to say who took
True.
Nikon to court in Japan, and that's actually Panasonic. So I think all in all, it's a very interesting story. I think so many people don't like Red because what they did to the industry in so many ways the industry kind of froze, and it took years to implement and add those internal raw recording. For me, it's even more interesting why Panasonic took Nikon to court because of that. Is Panasonic planning anything? Probably we will know also soon. Although Panasonic already has ProRes RAW, but you never know how with those big companies how it works. When you do this, who is paying the bill here? Is it Panasonic paying the bill, or Apple is paying the bill to Red if they did reach an agreement? But I think it's a beginning of something, and let's see if it will have any domino effect, and the rest of the world will also. When I was young, there was this Free Willy that was the movie, and now it's gonna be free RAW. Let's see if that's gonna be the case.
Yeah. So some people mentioned in the comments that this the US versions of that patent have started to expire. However, we know that they quite successfully in the past have extended it several times. So there is no reason to believe that until this point in time that this extension might have been granted. So let's see what that means now for a possible extension of that patent. it might be a little bit harder. So, because of course those patent courts look at each other's decisions very carefully. Yeah. So let's see what it happens. I mean, it's it's not that we consumers, shooters, are still suffering from that, because arguably we have raw internal now from almost or basically every manufacturer, except for Fujifilm, I guess. But yes, like you said, those companies are paying for that. They are paying for that access, and Nikon has been willing to give licenses for that. But apparently they seem to be losing the grip on the patent. Yeah. Good. Let's move on to your EVF post. You wrote a nice piece about welcoming back the EVF and that we've missed it.
I tell you, I think it's the beginning of every conversation with any manufacturer who is bringing to the market a successful camera. And it's like with Canon, and it's with Sony, and it's with Nikon. It's like great cameras, but where is the EVF? And with so many of them, we hear that they're running market research, no clue with whom and what. And it's always the same answer. There is no demand. Nobody wants an EVF. And for us as professionals who are relying on EVF or grew up with an EVF, it's like, what? And those are companies that are dealing with professional people. They know the value of an EVF and the reason why you need it. If it's just another point of stabilization, if it's to get the exposure correct, or if it's just to have your own, you just need your own vision, freedom, just to compose the shot without so many people watching it on monitor and so on. This is something so intimate, and this is something that helps in so many ways. So it was always a surprise, and I think every modern camera that came to our office for review without an EVF already had somehow a bad score, and it was almost like being like a Rottweiler. Both of us keep reminding those companies we need an EVF. Now, we don't take a credit to any of this. I'm just saying that it was really nice to see that the Sony FX2, when it came with an EVF, it was the beginning of something. And now with the FX5, it's a good solution, meaning if you don't need an EVF for your work, fine. But if you do need it, you can buy it, although it's quite expensive. I mean, this is something that, for example, with the GFX 100 II, they have a perfect solution. It's already included. The EVF is part of the camera. What you need to buy if you want to is an extension. And then with the extension, you can do so much more. But the EVF is part of the camera. So in this article, I ran through a little bit through the history from using those Zacuto add-on on the LCD screen at the back of the camera. And then, of course, mentioning Cine that was the first company, a South Korean company that came out with an EVF, I think I don't know how many years ago. And then you had so many others trying to do so all the way to Kinefinity. But the thing is that those external EVF are still very expensive. Sometimes they cost even more than the camera itself. So all we at CineD hope that other manufacturers like Canon, like Nikon, even like Panasonic are watching carefully and also listening, not only watching. Please bring us EVFs. We need it for daily work. It will only do good to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this, like you said, this change in mind that specifically Sony had when they had this super successful FX3, and then basically the FX, and they always told us people are not demanding EVFs, and then they brought out the FX2, which had a built-in EVF again, which is basically his biggest selling point compared to the FX3. That was very curious, and of course now with the FX5 having it optionally attachable is great. I'm just still stunned that there is not any really small EVF in the market that can be attached to a lot of different cameras. It's still either those third-party ones that are all quite big. and bulky, or which of course the Kinefinity being the smallest, but it's not really small, and that's it. And then you have all those proprietary options that only work with the same manufacturer's cameras.
Yeah, I mean, we know that some companies, smaller companies, are working on maybe some solutions. I think it's not easy, and it's not always that from the technical perspective, an HDMI needs a handshake in order to work with another component. And I think if you bring to the market something like this, maybe some cameras will work and others not. So it's very important to state which cameras might work. If we want like a USB-C solution, not all camera manufacturers are allowing the video signal to go through USB-C, but still, of course, there is a room to do so, and I hope that we will see more innovation here. I just want to give a shout out to Atomos, actually, because in my eyes, this is the company that actually educated a whole generation to work with monitors. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but don't forget that Atomos was there from the beginning with their monitor recorders, and that's why it's somehow even connected to RAW recording when cameras were still not recording RAW, and Atomos was the one to allow RAW recording. It drove people to work with Atomos monitors. So in a way, when I say shout out, it's a meaning that they really, for good and for bad, it doesn't matter. They did such a great marketing work back in the days to educate people that that's what they need. They need an external monitor that can also record RAW. And that's when I saw the market shifting, and me, and I know many other veterans in our industry, including you, Nino, we're like watching, like, hey, what's going on? How come the new generation can work with monitors, and so many times you see them like this, or in so many positions that are also not healthy, not for your health, not for your neck. Full sunlight, how do you judge exposure if you want to do run and gun and so on? But I know young generation might work a little bit different. Bottom line, I'm really happy to welcome the EVF back, and hopefully more companies will follow.
Good. Let's move on to a small story. Atlas, Mercury, Anamorphics have significantly dropped in price. Now we want to mention that because, of course, you've been using a 42mm anamorphic Atlas Mercury lens on some of the latest reviews, including the FX5 review. And I mean, the price drop is significant. We look at, what is it actually? It's like half the price almost, right?
I think it's almost 50% in some cases. I love those lenses. And it was always my own grief that not so many people can really experience working with an Atlas lens. Minimum focus is really great. The picture is gorgeous. It's really supporting open gate in such a nice way with so many cameras, still giving you a nice texture. And now, from whatever reason, I mean, personally, I think it's a lot of market pressure from the Chinese companies. But whatever the reason is, now you can really, let's say differently, Atlas made their Mercury lenses from a rental item to an end user item. I wish even if the discount would be even greater, it would be nicer. But still, this is now the point that if you are investing in lenses, this is really something to consider as a private use and not like a rental piece.
Yeah, so specifically the 36, 42, 54, 72, 95, and 138mm is used to cost $8,000 and it's now $4,500 each. The 27, 24, 32mm used to cost $10,000 and are now $6,000 each. And yeah, the same translates into euros at CVP. So yeah, if you are in the market to buy any of those lenses, please consider using our buy links on the site. It helps keep the lights on. We get a very small commission from B&H and CVP, our retail partners. So please consider clicking on those links when you buy. We just think it's great to have this news from Atlas, and it goes completely against the trend in the market, which as we have seen in the camera results, actually the camera manufacturer earnings, I mean, the trend is to raise prices right now for a lot of gear, specifically gear that contains electronics. And Atlas is moving in the other direction, which is great. And we love the look of those lenses. I mean, they're just really gorgeous anamorphics, and it's nice to have them more accessible. All right, let's move on to Blackmagic with a firmware update to their cameras, specifically the Cinema Camera 6K. Blackmagic Camera 1022 gives this camera face detection, autofocus, cloud streaming, and 10-minute pre-record. Who would have thunk? That's why when Blackmagic can do that in a firmware update to an existing camera that's been in the market for years, why can't Sony do that to the FX5? So we have now 10-minute pre-record on a camera that has been in the market forever. And that's quite interesting. So, that's a question we should pose to Sony if we talk to them again about this. Why is, Blackmagic capable of doing that? And it hasn't been, I don't even remember them announcing this. So it's really cool. Lately, especially how much love they give their existing cameras, and suddenly, autofocus specifically has always been a bit of an afterthought for Blackmagic design, and we know through their most recent firmware updates that they've really made a lot of gains in that field, and it's become really good actually in many, not all their cameras, but a lot of existing cameras.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that those updates are for free.
Yeah.
Technically, I have no clue how it works because it's not that we heard about autofocus, like the future capability of face detection autofocus when the camera came out. So it's nice to see, or actually it keeps me optimistic that maybe there are other cameras in the line that might or will be able to do so. But it's interesting from the technical perspective how after so many years you are able to enable a function on something that was not even clear that that I didn't know that the camera can do this. And the same for the cache recording. But you know what? It's nice to see how much love Blackmagic is getting from people when they do something like this, and people, they feel served. They feel that they are being taken care of. They feel that their investment is not gone just like that. And I think this is something that every manufacturer should look at, especially when we have so many new cameras in the market coming in such a pace, which is really crazy. And that also brings me to another, back to the main point, that so many good cameras in the market are simply not obsolete. We live in this world that we always want the greatest and the newest. Sometimes even blame us for that, because that's the core of our business, is to report about new equipment and test it. But we should never forget that there's a lot of secondhand, and a lot of people are still holding those older cameras, and those are very capable. And if you ask some of the Blackmagic people, this specific Cinema Camera 6K, they simply love it.
Cool. Let's move on to some audio gear news. Specifically, the DJI Mic Mini 2S has been released. Now, what's interesting, we know a lot of those DJI mics now, and minis and so on. This is the first one in the mini line that offers onboard 32-bit float internal recording. We've had this, of course, in their normal DJI mic line. Now it's also in the mini, and they come with 14.5 gigabyte built-in storage, which is, a lot. And up to 4 transmitters are supported. So this is arguably their consumer line. It confuses me a little bit because I don't actually know what the difference to the normal mic line is anymore. If you remember, the DJI Mic 3, that's the normal one, was the one that introduced 32-bit float, but it also doesn't have a mini jack connector anymore, which is unfortunate. And now we have the Mic Mini 2S, which also has 32-bit float without a mini jack connector. So you cannot use this with a lavalier mic, which is unfortunate. So unfortunate. I mean, we've all, for better or worse, gotten used to seeing those transmitters on necks everywhere, and almost all the manufacturers except for Holy Land, which, full disclosure, is a sponsor of this show, but still, they're the only ones who actually give you a chance to not show their logo by turning it around. But all the others have their logo very prominently in your face, and DJI actually is releasing this also with a different covers, like in different colors. But even if you apply those different covers, all of them show the DJI logos. There's actually a cutout for the logo on each one of them. So that's something, caveat we have to live with.
Gaffer is my best friend here, and if you show me before when you're talking hiding my face, it's because I'm one of those who actually now using those microphones. It's easy, and for some of the jobs, it's good enough, in all honesty. But of course, if you need something more serious and you want to rely on your Sunken or any other good microphone, you really must have an input, 3.5 millimeter input. And I think we should also just talk to the DJI and ask why it's not there. I guess the size is a limitation here, but maybe there is a way just to know. It would be interesting to know why they are neglecting us, the professionals.
Well, I guess they're just selling. I mean, we see a lot of competition in this market, which I think was pioneered by Rode, but now so many manufacturers are making those small, wireless, inexpensive transmitters, and more and more of them are offering 32-bit float. I think one of the reasons might be that more and more people, of course, use AI voice processing in post anyway. First of all, you have AI noise reduction built in. So, and usually that's quite strong. I mean, you usually have like 2 or 3 steps with those things, and it can be quite strong when you just enable it all the way. And it works really well. I mean, you literally don't hear surrounding noise anymore, but it at some point, or of course, it affects the quality of the audio recording. It's just the capsule in those things is not usually that great compared to a proper professional lavalier mic. But if you apply some AI noise cancellation in post, and some of this works with reconstructing the audio rather than fixing it, it's really rebuilding your voice, it might sound better than it actually sounded in the original. So I guess that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't mind not having that ability anymore, because the audio quality is not so much defined by the microphone capsule anymore, but by the post-production software you use. And that just simply didn't used to be the case. What do you think about this, Felix, because you're an audio guy, so...
They are serving a bigger market with them. Most of the people just don't care if you can attach an external microphone, because like this is definitely done for the people who are using this with their phone. Yeah, this is the target audience for those kind of products, and this is huge. I think they probably sell so many of those microphones. I mean, I think every week almost such a new microphone comes out. In my perception, it's crazy. So I mean,
I think it's true what you say. It's like it's just such a market that's probably 50 times as big as it used to be, because now everybody buys them just for content creation, whereas it just used to be something that's only for professionals, and most people don't require the lav connector. The only thing that I don't understand in DJI's lineup is that the Mic 3 doesn't have it either, and that was supposed to be their professional line. And now the Mini 2S also doesn't have the connector, so it's just a very confusing lineup for me. You have, of course, the Mic 2 still, which has the connector. So anyway, but one more, and of course price is very attractive. We're talking about, do I have the pricing here? No, I forgot to put the pricing, I think, here at the bottom. Yeah, we're talking about a 1 transmitter, 1 receiver kit for 99 euros, and 2 transmitters and 1 receiver for 189. So very affordable, actually. Good. The other audio gear news of the week is a bit more professional. It's the Saramonic K9 XTX, which is a plug-on UHF transmitter, also with 32-bit float recording, timecode, and 48 volts phantom power. Now, Johnny, you actually wrote this, so
I think it's a great solution for those who have some shotguns, even older one that needs phantom power, but also you can either start to record on this device in 32-bit as a safety, and also transmit to your mixer if you buy a full kit here. So I think it's a great offering to some older devices that are still very good and in the market, but maybe you stopped using them because you either don't have an XLR connector or XLR attachment to your mirrorless camera. So this is definitely something to look at. I'm very eager to try this with some older Sennheiser 416, for example, that we have lying for years in the office, and we haven't done much with it because I think it can really give new life for those microphones.
yeah, and I mean, built-in timecode support and 32-bit float as a backup built-in is quite cool. I would just recommend Saramonic to go a little bit easy on their featured images because somebody pointed out, somebody has a easy rig without an easy rig on that image, and the headphones over the hoodie. I don't know. It's like strange. Anyway, yeah, but a cool solution and very promising. And just quick mention, you wrote about CP Plus 2027.
That's right. I mean, the point of this article, first of all, we are we are the media partner of the CP Plus. This is, by the way, the CIPA organization that we talked before. And I think the nice thing here, the exhibition will be next year, February. But the nice thing here to let people know, and mostly companies know, that the Exhibitor applications are now open, and they do have special prices for early bird companies, like whoever is registering now. It's a great show. I think it's always nice to have a show in Japan when the people are they're very enthusiastic, and this type of show, I have to say, is for everybody. This is one of the only shows in the industry that potentially I could bring my kids to visit with me too, because there's so much to do for families. So this is, if you are a company that is catering from professionals, photographers, filmmakers, and whoever, it's an appealing show for a wide variety of people who are visiting, for visitors. So it's really worth, and I think it's not that expensive if you compare it to IBC, NAB, and such. So I really do encourage you guys, especially if you're a company, to consider.
Cool. Moving on to quick mention, Strada 2.0 is now available, and it mounts remote storage as a virtual drive, which is something we've asked them for a long time, and now the final version is out. So you can treat this as if you have an actual like external hard drive or something. But you're really...
Well, the big thing here is to actually access it from the Finder. That's the nice thing,
that's what
because
I mean. That's
it's
why
literally...
it shows up like an external drive, in the Finder, of course, and you can drag and drop files. Just take a look at Strada and what it's capable of. I think for remote editing with a proper internet connection, this can actually make a big difference. And it could potentially save a lot of cost, which we're paying for, cloud service like Frame.io and so on in the future. And also all the built-in feedback functions and so on. Then quick mention of the HOVERAir Versa. This is just something we came across on, I think, Kickstarter. Is it a Kickstarter? Indiegogo campaign. Now, this is a drone from a Chinese company that incorporates a handheld pocket camera, which looks very much like a Pocket Series camera from DJI. So that thing goes either inside the drone, or it just... You handhold it separately. It looks like very much like a consumer drone with those prop guards and so on. But interesting combination. My question always is, of course, why combine the two. I mean, I guess for consumers, it makes sense. You buy one device instead of two. However, of course, it usually comes at a compromise because, I mean, those handheld units are, not that they're heavy, but for a drone, it's fairly heavy to have something like this inside, which means that it will drain your battery faster. But as a
I love it.
I think
I love it, Nino.
Cool idea. Yeah. Well,
I love this idea. This is, if I was the one to develop products, I would always try to have at least two purposes in each product. That's part of the innovation. And when I see something like this, imagine that you have your handheld device as a handheld gimbal, and then you need to fly it somewhere. You just do this. You simply put it in the middle, secure it, fly it, and it's done. I think the innovation here is amazing. This product is not available yet. I hope that we can see it somewhere soon. Here in Japan, I saw Hover pushing very hard, especially in those Japanese exhibitions. They have this section that people can really try and, of course, try and buy. But here I actually more interested in the gimbal part and to see how much competition it can give DJI and Insta360, for example. Yeah, because there are no specifications yet, especially when it comes to video, what it's capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, it is a flying Osmo Pocket, but it certainly won't have the quality of the 4P. It's not going to be a low-fix sensor for sure. But yeah, it's nice that Jacob put in this article, would you like to see a flying detachable Osmo Pocket 4P also, which of course would be fun. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. I'm just always a little bit skeptical because I feel like if you put too many things together, it's compromising on each front, and then you have an overall compromise where it's probably not it could be that it's not a great drone and it's not a great pocket camera. It's just doing both, hopefully well enough for some people to use it. But yeah, let's see. Quick mention of Brevidy for Adobe Premiere Pro. So this is a plugin toolkit that lives directly in Premiere Pro. And it combines animated captions, automatic clip generation from long-form content, and active speaker vertical framing, and a stock media browser in a single panel. It's a plugin, and now I think it integrates natively with the AI caption translation in Premiere Pro, which is, I think, available since version 25.2. And additional AI functions that have been added. Now, I mean, this auto cutting of longer content into clips is something I think that makes a lot of sense. Actually, it has, honestly, we use a different tool for this, but, you often, a lot of the reels you see on our Instagram and so on are manually cut, like, for example, the podcast ones. However, from some other content, like from trade shows, we do use tools that help us actually define strong moments from those reels and as a starting point for the edit. And it saves, we can just tell you, it saves the team a lot of time to actually get those out. So I haven't personally tried this Brevidy tool, but I think it's very nice to have this built into the editing software directly. For those animations and those automatic cut downs. This actually has a function called auto cut that turns podcasts like this one into social clips. So maybe we should give this a try to automate some of the clips that we're doing and automatic reframing to vertical. So it makes a lot of sense to kind of have that directly in your NLE. This tool is a subscription with different plans, and it starts at $15 per month, which is actually quite a bit lower than a lot of those online tools that do the reframing cost. So I think it's worth trying out to have this natively in your Premiere Pro. Okay, so link has all the links we talked about in the show notes if you're interested in Brevidy, this AI tool for Premiere Pro for automatic captions and social clips. And last but not least, I want to mention our educational article of the week. It's called Unlocking Performance, Actor-Director Collaboration, Uncanny Choices and On-Set Immersion. And in this article, Masha talks about the actually, she was, I think, inspired by the Odyssey and Obsession, and the quite uncanny acting choices in those two movies. And so she's trying to define what makes those specific performances, some of the performances in these movies specifically creepy, and tries to talk about the chemistry between the actors and the director in these movies, and what actually like how this came about. It's quite an interesting read, a little bit longer than usually, and it talks about improvisation, on-set spontaneity, also what's scripted and what isn't, and looks at some historical examples also, like The Godfather by Francis Ford Coppola and so on. And there's also some really cool interview snippets embedded in the article of actors that worked with Christopher Nolan before, and like what he taught them and how the relationship actually was. So very, very interesting read. Just check it out. It's called Unlocking Performances, and the link in the show notes. So, Johnny, that was a long episode. I think we should close.
It was a very long. Do you think anybody stayed until the end?
Well, if you still listen to this, you won something. You won. What did you win? You won your right to watch the next one. So, thanks for sticking around, and see you on the next episode of Cine Focus Check. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this episode with everybody you think could be interested in this. Leave a comment on the Cine article for this podcast or the YouTube video, or email us at podcast@cined.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast, and see or hear you next week. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.